Hello, I think we took this class with you once, no?
You probably did.
Well, we need a refresher.
Yeah.
Who can remember? But now I'm going through all my old notes. I'm cleaning. I'm all my melting.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
I have another meeting, but I'm leaving Dave with you.
Okay.
But I'll be back. Should we, do you want to mute it or unmute it?
Mute it, because once I start to talk, I'm going to mute everybody.
Oh, you're going to mute it. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Dave, do you want to be unmuted or muted? Now, look, see the microphone? Okay. Now you.
Shalom, shalom.
Okay, now tell him. Now he'll tell you something.
Yes, David.
I'll be back.
No, I enjoyed it.
He didn't hear you. Tell him again.
I enjoyed the chocolate service that you gave.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad you were there. All I see is the top of your head.
Right.
I see the top half of your head. I don't see the whole head. All right, we're good. We're glad you're here. Let's see, Marcia has.
What happened to Crone? Did he disappear?
To David? David's actually, well, he pops in periodically for davening. He has no official role. He just davens for us because he enjoys doing so. So he right now, I think he's traveling a lot in Colorado because he can work from there.
You can't work from here?
He can. I think it's just, I think he's hiking and enjoying nature.
Yeah. He's enjoying fires.
I would imagine he's not where the fires are, but yes, that's a possibility.
Yeah, well, you know what they say in Spanish?
What's that?
A veces what's that hut? He doesn't know the good thing that he has.
Yeah. Well,
you do.
Yeah. All is good. I have no complaints. How are you feeling?
Okay. We getting a little tired of sitting around and just trying to make do.
Yeah, I get it.
It's very disconcerting.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's probably going to go on for a while.
Yes, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, we deal with the cards we're dealt.
That's true.
It's God's sense of humor sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that's what you have to have.
Hello, Marcia, Bob, Andrew. I know you, Barbara, Gerald.
Yeah.
David. Apparently 2 Marcias. There we go. It's good. Can never have enough Marcias.
Sure.
Phyllis.
Well, your congregation is very unusual.
How's that?
Everybody really knows how to carry a service.
Yeah, there's a lot of
service. Most congregations don't have that capacity.
Yep.
Hi, it's
But
Phyllis.
we
I just
know-
wanted to say hi to everybody. I'm going to go off camera in a second. Hope everybody's
Hello.
doing well.
Did people have the materials run off? It was, all right. It was sent as part of the there's handouts that would send in. There's two ways to get it. One is through the morning Boker Tov, which we send out through the congregation. The other is I've created a face group group called Tefillah with TEFILLAH. Tefillah with CMEL. It was I put it together this summer, and the materials are being put in there. So today we'll read at you, but hopefully in the future you'll be able to have the at and the materials as well, and we can have different people read and participate. That's the goal. All right.
So,
Yeah.
well, I generally come for Dita Daphne reading.
Okay. All right. Well,
And
so
yeah. Go ahead.
all right. So first of all, I've got everybody here, David, and everybody's listening right now. So you're not talking to me directly. Everybody hears you. So the other thing is in that I also put an outline of the discussion, because I know when I took classes, having an outline helped me a lot, understand how things fit together. And so I've provided that with them. There you go. Barbara's putting it up. There you go.
Because she's good.
There you go. So that's the outline, and the readings will be in there as well. Okay. Let's give people just a couple more minutes.
So was this also in the email?
It's in the morning Boker Tov, and yes, and in the email about the adult ed. Yeah, there's a link there to just click on, and you'll be able to run it off.
And you said on the Facebook group is Tefillah?
With CMEL. That's Cantor Mark Edward Levine. CMEL. Tefillah with CMEL.
Thank you, Cantor. Levine.
Okay.
I'm surprised that Dave Chrome is in California. I'm sorry, in
Florida, Seattle.
No, he's closer than that.
He's in Colorado. He's in Colorado.
He's in Colorado, right?
Right.
And they're having problems with the fire.
They are, but not the whole state. I'm sure wherever he is, he's not going where the fires are.
Well, it's it's really gone not only in the city portion, but also in the surrounding forest.
Right. All right. Good morning, everybody. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna mute everybody. Hold on one second. Here we go. All right. And we're gonna get started. Again, this is a class that is going to be offered twice a week, on Sundays at 11, on Thursdays at noon. If you can't make one, you can attend the other. You don't need to sign up per se. You're welcome to either one. The links are different, so you do need to look into that. And the Zoom link is different because it's a different time of day. It's a course I wrote a number of years ago, but unfortunately, it's not as if things have improved. To the contrary, if anything, they've gotten worse over time. But it really, it's something that began as the 21st century began. It's not something there's a tendency to believe that all of the anti-Semitism we're experiencing is something of the last 4 years and the political environment and all that's going on. And the reality of it is, well, that hasn't necessarily helped in any way. It started way before that. It's really with the beginning of the 21st century that we've woken up to the fact that anti-Semitism is not a relic of the past. It is current events. In August of 2001, we watched on television as protesters harassed Jews at the UN World Conference Against Racism, a conference against racism in South Africa. And Jews at that conference, ironically, were being abused and harassed. There was openly anti-Jewish literature being distributed at this conference. And you've got a conference whose goal is to combat prejudice of all kinds. And during that conference, they end up formally condemning the only democracy of the Middle East, Israel, and calling for its destruction. Men and women who prided themselves on staunch opposition to all forms of racism, assaulted Jews, and shouted anti-Semitic slurs. They had signs, posters, leaflets with anti-Semitic stereotypes and myths. And the gathering, in the words of Hillel Halkin, he called it the largest and best publicized international anti-Semitic rally in history. All right. Now, need to know, obviously not everybody there was participating, but as is usually the case, almost no one spoke out against the assaults or essentially the blatant racist anti-Semitic rhetoric. That's the framework for beginning where we are. I want to take you through the first 15 years of this century. Reading number one, Laurie, I think you have it on the screen. Would you read us reading number one?
On September 11th, 19 men hijacked 4 passenger planes. At 8:45 and 9:03 a.m., 2 planes crashed into the World Trade Center. At 9:17 a.m., the Federal Aviation Administration shut down all American airports. At 9:30 a.m., President Bush announced that the United States had been attacked by terrorists. At 9:43, a 3rd plane crashed into the Pentagon. At 10:05, the South Tower collapsed. At 10:10, a section of the Pentagon collapsed and a 4th hijacked plane crashed into a field in Pennsylvania. At 10:28, the North Tower collapsed.
Okay. None of this is probably news to anybody. I assume you've heard of these events, okay? But what is fascinating is the fact that despite the fact that Al-Qaeda took credit for the attacks, rumors claiming that the Jews were responsible spread like wildfire. And because it was on the internet, it was widely accepted by many people. As the last 20 years have gone through, we've come to accept the fact that the internet is this source of information, both good and bad. But in September of 2001, this response and the use of the internet was relatively new in using it in this way. And in the months that followed, those rumors and more attacks on Jews occurred. There are videos out of people. I have a video sitting here in my office of the way in which people accuse the Jews of being responsible, that they knew in advance, they didn't show up, and so the Jews were saved from these events. It didn't matter that Al-Qaeda took credit. Anti-Semitism was front and center and playing out in our faces. And over the last 2 decades, these snakes of anti-Semitism, of Jew hatred, have abounded throughout Europe. And so go with me a little bit here. In Belgium, thugs beat up the chief rabbi, kicking him in the face and calling him a dirty Jew. 2 synagogues in Brussels were firebombed and another was sprayed with automatic weapons. In Britain, the cover of the New Statesman, a left-wing magazine, depicted a large Star of David stabbing the Union Jack. Oxford professor Tom Paulin told an Egyptian interviewer that American Jews who moved to the West Bank and Gaza should be shot dead. A yeshiva student reading the Psalms on a bus in London was stabbed 27 times. Anti-Semitism, wrote a columnist in The Spectator, the British magazine, has become respectable at London dinner tables. And she quoted one member of the House of Lords who said, "The Jews have been asking for it, and now, thank God, we can say what we think at last." That's Britain. Italy. The daily newspaper La Stampa published a 1-page cartoon with a tank emblazoned with a Jewish star, pointing its gun at the baby Jesus who pleads, surely they don't want to kill me again. And then in the first 2 months of 2013, we have reading number 2. Does anybody have this? If you do, please feel free to unmute, or it's there in front of you. All right, Andrew, would you read it?
Sure. January 26, 2013, Rome, anti-Semitic inscriptions. January 27, Holocaust, nothing but lies and disgrace. And Israel is still the hangman. January 27, I cannot remember, Israel does not exist, death to Zionists, signed by the militia organization, have appeared on some of the walls in central Rome. January 27, 2013, Milan, an anti-Semitic blasphemous inscription, Europe belongs to the whites, Jews go back to the desert, was sprayed on the walls of a local school. January 27, 2013, Turin, a black swastika found on a memorial plaque which commemorates 4 Italian partisans killed in massacres in May 1944 and April 1945. January 31, 2013, Udine, an anti-Semitic blasphemous inscription, "The Shoah must go on," was sprayed in town. February 8, 2013, Fiuggi, anti-Semitic and neo-Nazi inscriptions, "Anna Frank is a liar, the Shoah is a fraud," and some swastikas appeared in the city.
Germany. Thousands of neo-Nazis had a rally near a synagogue on Shabbat. Graffiti on a synagogue wall saying 6 million was not enough. Ukraine, skinheads attacked Jewish worshippers and smashed the windows of Kiev's main synagogue. And the Ukrainian police deny that it has any that it's anti-Jewish. Holland, an anti-Israel demonstration featured swastikas and pictures of Hitler and chants of Sieg Heil and Jews into the sea. I could go on and on and on. France, probably where it's been worse. In Lyon, a car was rammed into a synagogue and set on fire. In Montpellier, the Jewish religious center was firebombed, and synagogues in Strasbourg and Marseille, and a Jewish school in Crete. A Jewish sports club in Toulouse with a Molotov cocktail. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. Okay, I'm not even going to read reading number 3. We're just going to skip it because you'll see it just goes. I basically gave you 2013, 2012, 2011. Look online, and you can, for the last decade of anti-Semitic events, and you will spend the next 3 months reading. It is unlimited. I want to go to reading number 4.
Cantor,
Yes.
it's Peggy. How are you?
Hi, Peggy.
I had a question. The one in Turin, were the 4 Italian partisans Jewish? Is that, it doesn't say anything about that.
In Italy?
Yeah, January 27th, 2013, Turin. It says it was on a plaque for 4 Italian partisans.
I don't know whether they were Jewish or were they Jewish supporters. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
What about here in the United States? I know the Southern Anti-Poverty Center tracks a lot of hate groups and militias and white militias. Are we going to talk about them as well? Because I'm more worried about what's happening here than some of the things in Ukraine.
So the first thing is, all right, this is a course on history, not on current events. What I'm trying to show here is that it is not necessarily an issue of the last 4 or 5 years. What's happened in all over Europe inevitably was going to come here. It is not just the political situation of the last 4 or 5 years. It was coming anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So actually, I want to go ahead. I'm going to jump ahead to reading number 5. Barbara, if you will bring this up. We are not, as Peggy just mentioned, we're not immune here in the United States. And this is going back to September of 2002. Lawrence Summers, who was the president of Harvard, delivered an unprecedented warning about the eruption of anti-Semitism on American campuses. Okay, this is 2002. All right, Peggy, you want to read it? Peggy? All right.
Unmute. Whoops, there I am. I'm
There you go.
unmuted now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that. I had a cat throwing up over here, so
Okay.
I was stepping
you.
away. Which one, where it says, where do you want me to read?
Reading number 5, where it says, I speak to you.
Okay, let me scroll down. Got it. Uh, I speak to you today, not as president of the university, but as a concerned member of our community about something that I never thought I would become seriously worried about, the issue of anti-Semitism. But today I'm less complacent and comfortable because there's disturbing evidence of an upturning anti-Semitism globally, and also because of some of the developments closer to home. Consider some of the global events of the last year. There have been synagogue burnings, physical assaults on Jews, or the painting of swastikas on Jewish memorials in every country in Europe. Observers in many countries have pointed to the worst outbreak of attacks against Jews since the Second World War. The United Nations sponsored World Conference on Racism, while failing to mention human rights abuses in China, Rwanda, or any place in the Arab world, spoke of Israel's policies prior to recent struggles under the Barak government as constituting ethnic cleansing and crimes against humanity. I could go on, but I want to bring this closer to home. Of course, academic communities should be and always will be places that allow any viewpoint to be expressed. And certainly there's much to be debated about the Middle East and Israel's foreign policy that can be and should be vigorously challenged. But where anti-Semitism and views that are profoundly anti-Israel have traditionally been the primary preserve of poorly educated right-wing, I've lost my place, like right-wing populists, profoundly anti-Israel views are increasingly finding support in progressive intellectual communities. Serious and thoughtful people are advocating and taking action that are anti-Semitic in their effect, if not their intent. For example, hundreds of European academics have called for an end to support for Israeli researchers, though not for an end to support for researchers in any other nation. Israeli scholars this past spring were forced off the board of an international literature journal. And some here at Harvard and some at universities across the country have called for the university to single out Israel among all nations as the long country, or is it appropriate for any part of the university's endowment to be the lone country? I think there's a typo there.
Yes.
Where it isn't appropriate for any part of the universe endowment to be invested. I've always, throughout my life, been put off by those who heard the sound of breaking glass in every insult or slight and conjured up images of Hitler's Kristallnacht at any disagreement with Israel. Such views always seem to me alarmist, if not slightly hysterical. But I have to say that while they seem to be unwarranted, they seem rather less alarmist in the world of today than they did a year ago. I would like nothing more than to be wrong. It is my greatest hope and prayer that the idea of a rise in anti-Semitism proves to be a self-denying prophecy, a prediction that carries the seeds of its own falsification, but that depends on all of us.
Okay, so when
That
this
was a
is
long
written, when this was written in 2002, most of us would have been shocked. Most of us would have been shocked by this anti-Semitic rise. In today's world, we sort of just take it for granted. Things in his predictive words, his prophetic words have played out. And it's not, and as Peggy described, there's a sense of fear. In many ways, we are living in the most frightening times since the Holocaust. One could frame it as a sense that the last 70 years, from the time of the Holocaust to now, are the deviant time in history. What I mean by that is it's been a time of relative lack of anti-Semitism, and that what's happened is a return to the norm. I hope to be wrong. I hope that we're living in a period of time in which this is now a new deviant and will return to something that's far calmer. But history says, history teaches us that this is the norm. If anything, the amount of violence that we've experienced is less than the norm historically. All right. That said, not looking to create panic, looking to put things in historical context. I would open the floor for, let's take 5 minutes, and I'll take some comments on any of that, and then we'll go on. If anybody has any thoughts. Please just identify yourself if you speak, because I can't see everybody. Hearing none, I'm going on. Okay. All right. Abraham Joshua Heschel notes that the Holocaust did not begin with the building of crematoria, and Hitler did not come to power with tanks and guns. It all begins with uttering evil words, with defamation, with language, and with propaganda. He said that once having been uttered, these words gain eternity and can never be withdrawn. We see that with the power of the internet. People who want to believe this now have the opportunity to go find thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people who agree with them, whereas in a world before, they were so often isolated and assumed no one else agreed. Today, anything you want to believe, there's a group out there that you can find and use as a support system. Nobody is born knowing such evil words. Hatreds are learned. The good news is if they are learned, it means they're not inevitable. People who learn to fear and hate can learn to not fear and hate. But it plays out oftentimes in our cultures directly and indirectly, consciously and unconsciously, and often in places close to home. You find it blasted by the media and various groups in society, sometimes overtly, sometimes subtly. It's often the stereotypes that we're confronted with, whether they be Jewish or others. You find them embedded in individuals and institutions, in classrooms. It's easy for anyone who wants to create an us versus them mindset. It is very easy in today's world to get a crowd going. We see that all over our televisions. All you need is a crisis, and we know we'll hear the Jews are to blame. How many people, when they heard about George Zimmerman a number of years ago, breathed a deep sigh of relief to find out he was Hispanic and not Jewish? Okay? The terror, you hear a name and you go, please don't let it be somebody Jewish. It's terrifying. All right, so now what I wanted to do was frame the fact, and I think we've pretty much established that anti-Semitism is a part of our world today. That's not the point of this class. The point of this class is to look at history. The point of this class is to try and understand where it comes from. And as I mentioned in all the marketing, I'm going to give a history lesson of the last 2,000 years of anti-Semitism, but I'm not going to discuss the Holocaust. That is a class unto itself. It is, I don't want to trivialize it by trying to squeeze in to a 1 hour lesson. And that's the first issue. And the second thing is, because it's sufficiently recent, there's people who are far more qualified. There are survivors who can talk on this that I don't have any special expertise, and I don't want to claim to have it in their faces. I feel that's it's inappropriate. So I'm going to take us back more than 2,000 years. We're going to go back to pre-Christian times. The first thing to note is that until you get to more recent times, we need to know that the pagan antiquity, in terms of what happened to Jews, it's questionable whether it's anti-Semitic or not. Scholars have been arguing about this for years, but I want to show you today how the seeds of anti-Semitism were built. All right. I want to take you back to Elephantine. Elephantine is an isle in the Nile River in southern Egypt. By 600 before the Common Era. Okay, that's where we're going. Good. I love to see faces, not text. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. By 600 of the Common Era, before the Common Era, before Babylonia conquers Israel. So we're talking about in the years just prior to that, Jewish families had already been living in Elephantine for generations. They were not exiles or refugees. They chose to live there. They chose to leave their homeland and could have returned if they so desired to do so. In those days, it was common for emperors to hire foreign soldiers to protect their borders because they didn't want their own people armed. And so they preferred to place their trust in outsiders who were well paid to be loyal to their employer. That's why the Jews were there. Believe it or not, the Jews were the armies. All right, it's hard to believe. All right. And so, like the neighboring rulers, Egypt's pharaohs had hired companies of Jews, Assyrians, and foreign soldiers to protect their land. And some of those soldiers had been stationed in Elephantine. Even the Egyptian, I'm sorry, wrong place. And what this did, I've misplaced myself. I apologize. Give me 1 second. I turned the wrong page. There, I found the right page. I'm going the wrong direction. That's my problem. Give me 1 second. Here we go. So in order to obtain certain religious rights, the Jewish soldiers negotiated with the pharaohs who hired them to come to protect the borders of Egypt. And those rights were honored not only by the succeeding pharaohs, but by those who had conquered Egypt during different times. Egypt was often conquered by foreigners, Persians in particular, during this period of time, and they continued to hire the Jews. They remained in place, and their agreements were honored by the Persian rulers, whether or not it was Persia in control or Egypt. They were honored, and such stability enabled the Jews and their families to build a permanent home world for themselves on the island. That's the framework for where we're going. So we have the settled Jewish community serving as armed protectors of the world there. Much of what we know about these Jewish forces comes from the Elephantine archives of around 500 before the Common Era. The documents suggest the following. The Jews of Elephantine maintained their identity as Jews, and that their religious life, now but listen to this, their religious life centered on a temple that they built on the island. We're led to believe the only temple was in Jerusalem. In Elephantine, they had built their own temple. They probably kept the dietary laws of Judaism, meaning they wouldn't eat certain foods. They probably didn't work on Shabbat, a custom which wasn't common in the Egyptian society for sure. However, clearly there's a break here because they are sacrificing animals in the temple in Elephantine, which is absolutely prohibited by the priests of Jerusalem. There's a clear break here. The high priests in Judea had ruled that the only place sacrifices could take place was the temple in Jerusalem. It's possible this temple was built prior to the issuance of that ruling. It's also possible the Jews of Elephantine settled on the island, may have left Judea because they disagreed with the high priests. We don't know. Okay? What is known is that the sacrifices of the Jews of Elephantine made in their temple was not only a source of conflict with the high priests of Jerusalem, but with the Egyptians as well. The Jews and the Egyptians were often at odds because the Egyptians believed in a ram god. One of their many gods was a ram god. The role of the ram god, and this is why it was so important, was that they believed the ram god controlled the annual flooding of the Nile River, which is an event essential to the survival of Egyptian life. That's what fed the crops. That was core to their living. They believed in this ram god, and therefore they are absolutely outraged that the Jews are sacrificing rams among their sacrifices. They see it as blasphemy. At the same time, the Egyptian rulers had made an agreement with the Jews there, and so they remain silent and say nothing as the ram sacrifices are going on. In the spring of 410 before the Common Era, a group of Egyptians see an opportunity to force out the foreign Persian leaders and therefore the Jews who are working for them. That summer, with the support of a local ruler by the name of Vidranga, V-I-D-R-A-N-G-A, the rebels burn the temple on Elephantine and several homes nearby. The Jews fight back. They ultimately are victorious. They kill a number of the Egyptians, including Vidranga himself. 3 years later, the rebellion is history, but the Jews do not have permission yet to rebuild their temple there. That's the framework here. The Persians are still in control, and their anxious leaders send a petition to the Persians, reminding them of their long history on the island and the Jewish force that they've been offered and have provided, and their loyalty to Persia during this recent rebellion. We've been there for you. But the Persians don't immediately respond. They know that not only do they have to contend with the Egyptian priests on the island, they also know that the priests in Jerusalem are not happy with the temple here. And so in the end, what happens is a compromise is worked out. The Persians allow the Jews to restore their temple, but they rule that no longer could any animal sacrifices be offered in that temple. All right, so they're under pressure from both the priests in Jerusalem and the Egyptian society to find a compromise. Now, was the destruction of the temple an act of hatred towards the Jews? Was it retaliation for the Jews' religious sacrifices that the Egyptians saw as an insult to their God? Was it motivated by loyalty of Elephantine's Jews to Egypt's hated Persian conquerors? I open the floor for a little bit of discussion there. Is this anti-Semitism at its beginning? All right, this is not rhetoric. This is meant to get comment. Charles?
Yeah, I don't know anything about that period. I didn't know about Elephantine.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Significant. You're right. It's not well known, but it is a significant part of a significant Jewish population. If they had enough people to build a temple, it wasn't insignificant.
Actually, I read about Elephantine a couple of years ago, and presumably a lot is known. There's a big Geniza. There are a lot of papers there. So I don't know the answer to your question, Cantor Levine, but I suspect that there may be a lot of paperwork that may indicate it.
Yeah. So when I say there's not a lot known, when I say that, I don't mean among scholars. I mean, if you poll the Jewish community, they would have no idea of this community. You're right. Among scholars, we have the paperwork of the Genizas that have surfaced in time. All right. So to some extent, unless there's another comment, I'm open again.
I've read a couple of books about where that was mentioned, and of course it's all historical fiction, 99% fiction, I'm sure. But it sounded like from the book that this was kind of a progressive community, and I don't know if the author found any writings to really prove that or not. But it sounded like, I remember one book I read is like the women there had more rights than they would have had in Israel. And apparently the Egyptian women had a little bit more rights at that time, you know, in terms of owning property and working and whatever, getting out and about. You know, I don't know if there was anything in those Genizas or whatever that said that was true, you know.
Right. I can't speak to the General Society of Elephantine, you know, and I'm not going to say to you that Jerusalem was or wasn't the most advanced society of its time. There are plenty of, it probably depends on the marker you want to use. All right. Societies differed in the ways they progressed. All right. So let me just, yeah.
I was just going to go back because I think part of your question was this truly an anti-Semitic act or was there other things? And I think theoretically, it may not have been a purely anti-Semitic act at the time, but in fact, the situation was way more complex as you threw in a number of different reasons why it happened. And it lays the groundwork. I believe that it could be laying the groundwork for the building of the Jews caused this, so the Jews are the reason for that, and that kind of thing. And ultimately, this act alone may not have been anti-Semitic, but it becomes a part of the story of how anti-Semitism grows.
Right. And I started out by saying whether or not this is anti-Semitic, and it may or may not be. And then, by the way, the scholars don't agree. So, the fact that we don't have a conclusion is not a surprise, but it is clearly planting seeds. That's what you're describing.
Yeah, I would take issue with that. I think the anti-Semitism that developed in Christian Europe had a life of its own, and it had a lot to do with Jews as Christ killers. What was in Egypt was totally unrelated, and while it shows, as you've noted, that women had a paramount role, a very significant role, and did business and all of that. You can't really, in my opinion, I haven't seen anything that relates it to either European anti-Semitism or to progressive terms as you use them today in terms of what spectrum of the political story.
So first of all, next week we're going to talk about the early developments of Christian anti-Semitism. The following week we'll talk about Muslim sources, both which played out very strongly. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a sense of this caused that. What it's doing is, as a beginning, as a starting point, is definitely defining the Jew as the other. Okay, and that when I say seeds, that's what's going on. You're going to see that in the next story I talk about as well. But I'm going to jump ahead here to the story of Hanukkah. Okay, we're now jumping ahead, so a little bit, and you're going to see parallels to the things I just talked about in how it plays out. Are there political motivations? Yes. All right. So let's process this. Antiochus. All right. That's where we're going to go. 332 BCE, before the Common Era, Alexander the Great conquers Judea, which had previously been part of the Persian Empire. He brings with him not only Greek rule, but Greek culture as well. Ancient cultures are melting away in the wake of the introduction of Hellenization, and it tears down the barriers between people. All right, some of the borders are going away. People are becoming a little bit more ethnically combined with Hellenization. When Alexander the Great dies 9 years later in 323, his empire is divided among his generals. There's at least three, but there's two I want to deal with today. The two empires I want to break up are the Ptolemies, which is essentially the general was Ptolemy. Those who followed him in Egypt and basically south of Israel, and the Seleucids who were north of Israel in what we would today call Syria and Lebanon. Okay, so you've got two distinct subgroups of Greeks. I want to make that point because they both are maintaining Greek culture. They're just competing generals in a sense as to who is really going to be the ultimate power. All right, the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. Each dynasty wants to incorporate Palestine into its own realm, and therefore Judea, was battled over for more than 100 years, passing back and forth between these two ruling empires. This small piece of land, you look and you say, why would they care about this piece of land that's sitting there that seems to be primarily desert 2,000 years ago? Who cares? And the answer is its location. It sits on the cusp of three continents, of Europe, of Asia, and of Africa. And as a result, the control of Palestine, of Israel, is the control of the trade routes. So its strategic importance is its location. All right, and so there's a fight that goes on. The Ptolemies of Egypt are the first to annex Palestine, and they actually treated it relatively well. They were sensitive to the Jews' reputation as troublemakers, and they granted them a relatively substantial religious and political autonomy. So under the Ptolemies, it was a relatively decent life for them. In 198, before the Common Era, the Seleucids, under the leadership of Alexander III, not the one of Hanukkah fame, all right, but his father, seize Palestine and embark on this Hellenization process. All right, the Seleucids are not nearly as open to Jewish autonomy as the Ptolemies had been. When Antiochus III dies, there's another general who steps in, but ultimately, he's ultimately succeeded by his son, Antiochus IV, of Hanukkah fame. By this point, this is important to understand about where are the Jews, what's their life like? Much of the wealthy class in Palestine at that point admired and were very comfortable in welcoming and imitating Greek culture, and were embarrassed by the old Jewish ways. There's echoes of that in modern society for sure, okay? All right, so much of the wealthy class had made their way up the scales and were very comfortable maintaining the Greek way of life. 175 before the Common Era, Antiochus IV decides to launch a military campaign against the Ptolemies in Egypt. Why? To build a buffer zone against a new empire that is arising, the Romans. He's aware of the rise of the Romans, and in fear of a fifth column arising within his own population, he absolutely begins an attempt of creating one culture, of Hellenization, to try and bring everybody together as one identity. The Jews are a particular thorn in his side because they have the chutzpah to think themselves to be the rightful owners of Palestine and insisting on their own way of life. They also, now remember I said to you, the Ptolemies had treated them much better than the Seleucids, and so he knows that the Jews favor the Egyptian rule. He's going to go to war with the Egyptians, knowing that this population within his realm would much prefer the Egyptians to be in control. So you understand where he's coming from. Antiochus establishes a state church in which everybody within his realm is to accept. The god is the Greek god Zeus, and Antiochus is the visible form of Zeus. We call him Antiphanes. Antiochus Antiphanes. He's God manifest in the world. For the vast majority of the people living in that society, the introduction of another god for their list is not problematic. They have multiple gods. One more, big deal. Not problematic. The only people for whom this is a problem is the Jews. They've introduced this concept of monotheism. And so for them, having imposed upon them an alternative God is simply unacceptable. This is the Jew as the other in society. Everyone else can adopt a new God. The Jews are the other, they cannot. All right? And so Antiochus issues a decree forbidding on pain of death any display, any expression of Jewish distinctiveness. A pagan statue is erected on the altar in Jerusalem, and pagan sacrifices are offered there. The few who resist are arrested, punished, and killed. All right, so you have a sense of where Antiochus is coming from. You have a sense of why the Jews are singled out. Syrian officers visit Modim. We know the Hanukkah story, and there's a Jew who steps forward to offer a sacrifice, and Mattathias kills him. Seeing this, and on his death, Mattathias' death, his third son, Judah, takes up the head of the movement. there are several factors that enable this small group of Jews to be victorious. Victorious is somewhat of a limited kind of a label. Number one, the Jews are fighting on their home turf. All right. They know every cave, every rock, every path intimately. Think of Afghanistan when the Russians invaded. Okay. The advantage that they had, that the Russians just finally said it's not worth it, is they knew the land and they knew the turf. Second, Antiochus probably underestimated the desperation of the Jews fearing their loss of identity. Okay, so one is the knowing of the land. Two is the strong, he underestimates their identity. The third, and this is probably the critical piece, the Jews inflicted enough damage on the Syrian Greek armies that he made a tactical decision. Antiochus makes a tactical decision that with Rome on the horizon, this battle is not worth it. It's simply not worth it. He's got bigger fish to fry. Now, one can see the hand of God in that, sometimes just in the fact that the timing of it. Okay? You can read these events in history through many different lenses. The rabbis certainly saw the hand of God in process. The temple in Jerusalem is recaptured, it's cleansed, the service is restored, and popular belief portrays Antiochus as an early Hitler and his attack as anti-Semitic. But there really is no evidence for this. The reality is Antiochus is worried about the invasion of Rome and the fear of a fifth column. He also had a second motivation at play. Today's world, if you wanted a big collection of money and you had the ability to do it, you'd walk into the Vatican and take all their stuff. All right? Plenty of gold, plenty of money available. That was the temple in Jerusalem. If he could walk into the temple in Jerusalem and have access to all the valuables, it was a source of income for an upcoming battle. The point here is that the measures were dictated by political expediency, probably not hostility towards Jews per se, or Judaism for sure. The Jews he may have been angry at because of their ways, but Judaism he probably didn't care about. All right. What we have here, as I described, is the roots of anti-Semitism appearing in these times. The Jews being defined as the other. While we're proud of the fact that we introduced monotheism to the world, to these people, that was a threat. Because it made us different. It made us unable to blend in where everyone else could accept. I got 12 gods, make it 13. It was common in that world when you were conquered to accept, in addition, the gods of the conquering nation. And you have one group of people saying, we're not buying that. We're not going to play well. And so you can see Jews in that statement of monotheism are self-defining themselves as the other, whether I don't know that they thought of it in that way, but that's the way it's playing out. They have their own distinctive ways of eating. They have their own distinctive ways of taking a day off. All right. No other nation refused to interact in the way that the Jews did. They wouldn't intermarry. Their distinctiveness and their sense of chosenness, that's still at play here, plays strongly into this vision. Also, let me give you one other fact that's at play. There's an Egyptian dislike of the Jews. It's deeper than the usual hostility towards foreigners, and this can be seen in the writings of Manetho in the 3rd century before the Common Era. He's an Egyptian priest. He presents the story of the Exodus with the following lens: the Jews were a race of lepers who had been thrown out of Egypt during the time of Moses. Jewish civilization in his writings is depicted as sterile, as having produced nothing useful or value. All right. Addition, despite the fact that much of anti-Semitism, we often associate the anti-Semitic charge of the ritual murdering of a child for their blood with Christian thought. It actually existed much earlier. All right, the Apian, the Homeric scholar, charged Jews. This is in Greek times, with slaughtering and eating non-Jews in their religious rituals. He claimed that once a year, Jews would kidnap a Gentile Greek, fatten him up for a year, slay him, and sacrifice his body in a ritual, and then eat, that partake of the flesh. And while they were doing this, they swore an oath of hostility to the Greeks. And lastly, the Jews are also being accused by many in this times of being atheists. Right? Why? Because everybody else has a physical God. You can't see this phony God the Jews pray to. You see how the seeds are being planted in so many different ways. Charges of ritual slaughter, charges of atheism, Jewish rejection of the lifestyle of the people around them. Jews are being put into this category of other, and so therefore seeds are being built for this to go on. Now I want to take comments at this point. We have about 5 minutes. Next week I will get into the Christian sources that build on this, but I want to take comments at this point. Please.
Enter.
Yes, Bob.
How do you, they often contrast anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. And certainly the anti-Semitism or anti-Judaism of ancient times was nothing like the racism of the late 19th century and early 20th century and working up to the Holocaust.
Right. The nature of anti-Semitism has changed multiple times in history. As I think it was Andrew who said earlier, once the Christians are introduced, you end up with the charge of deicide, and that has its own level that we'll see. With nationalism, with the introduction, with Darwinism being introduced, the whole race concept becomes core, and you see that being used as a tool of anti-Semitism. So the nature of anti-Semitism has changed multiple times in history. The consistency is that it continues to happen and people find a new reason to do it. I'll also suggest to you, as you'll see as a pattern throughout, that economics is a big piece of it throughout history.
Well, during the Middle Ages, a Jew could convert to Christianity, but during the late 19th century, the racial stain was immutable. There was no.
Right. Once it became biological, what are you going to do with it?
Correct.
Right. Marcia?
Yeah, I just wanted to say in that regard about this biological idea of the late 19th century, I was very struck with what you read from the Egyptian scholar about the Jews are lepers, because that brings in the whole idea of decay, of sickness. The Jewish body is sick. And that's something that's going to come in the late 19th century very, very strongly.
Without question, what you see in these early times, and then you'll see it again in Christianity and in the writings of the Muslims, is they build one upon another. In the same way Hitler built on the writings of Wagner.
Absolutely.
Right. All right. It takes an intelligent person to look for precedent.
You're right.
Doesn't mean they're not evil, but it takes an intelligent person to be able to do that. And most of the anti-Semitism has been projected by people who are knowledgeable and take advantage of the masses and their economic needs.
Yes, yes. I think what you said earlier about the internet is such a strong thing about what's just in general about what's going on. That you have individuals who are sort of under rocks, and it wasn't the thing to talk about that. And now everybody can join together.
They've been empowered. And, you know, one of the things I remember growing up with is if you put something in writing, even for yourself, you concretize it. You may have been vague on how you were feeling about things, but once you put it in writing, not only do you become clearer in your own thought, you become committed to it. You build your commitment to something you might not have been as strongly committed had you not put it to writing. That's what the internet has enabled. Plus then the sharing and identifying of others to support your view.
Right.
Cynthia, I don't know if you raised your hand. Any other comments or thoughts? All right. This is a tough class. I got to tell you, each time I've taught it, I've come away from it a bit depressed. But in today's world, it's real. It's real. It's important to understand the underpinnings and the ideas that are being used to create it. What is also important to understand is it's not specifically from the left or from the right in our world. It's from both. It comes from both perspectives. It comes from extremism. Okay. And you need to watch either extreme. Jews have survived best when things are moderate. Moderation encourages toleration. That's probably the world in which Jewish survival has the best potential. All right. We'll see everybody next week unless there are other comments.
Thank you, Cantor.
Thank you. We'll play again. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was
Thank you.
terrific. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.